our conversation on favor. I'd love to have the favor of God, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yes.
Always. And I think that if you're a child of God, you're doing all that you can, you're being a good Christian, I think you're going to have the favor of God. What all did you find out about it?
Well, I went to the book of Esther, and I found several places where favor was mentioned. And the first time, when you open up Esther, Queen Vashti has been dethroned, and they are looking for a new queen. And so Esther is kind of in that group of eligible young ladies who are called to the palace, and they are going to be prepared to have their one chance to become a queen.
This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible.
Yes.
Have you read or seen the movie One Night with the King?
I've heard about it. I don't
It came
recall
on
watching
TVN a couple months ago, and I recorded it, so you should come over and watch it.
Yeah.
It's such a good movie, such a good story. Read the book of Esther. It's such a good story.
Yes, it's one of my favorites too. That and Ruth.
Yes.
And so Vashti is dethroned, and Esther now has been brought to the palace, and she kind of reports to a supervisor who will be in charge of her preparation.
Yes.
And it says that she gained favor, which allowed her special privileges and gifts and advice that he didn't give to every female there.
Yeah.
And several verses down, it says that she found favor with all who looked upon her. So she had favor with her peers.
Yep.
And eventually she found favor with the king. And so her night comes that she's going to be with the king, and of course he favors her, and she is crowned. And so she's now put in a position of power. And the man who raised her, Mordecai, he comes, because he's concerned about her, he comes to the palace gates and he sits just to kind of check on, see how she's doing. But this puts him kind of what you would say a political insider. He could catch the little tidbits of news and gossip that are coming from the palace. And he happens to hear a plot against the king. And he reports this, and Esther records it in his name, and it's recorded in the king's books. And that's going to become important soon. But it says that, I lost my place. We're going to go right back to it.
You said Mordecai.
Yes.
He had made a mark.
He had.
For his name.
Yes.
By reporting that the king was in trouble.
Yes.
Or
and
plotting to be murdered.
Yes. And those men, that plot is exposed, and those men are hanged. And then he comes again another day back to the palace gates. But this time he's dressed in sackcloth, and he's covered in ash, and he is wailing loudly. And he reports to Esther that he has been given another plot. But this time, the whole crew of the Jewish nation are going to be annihilated.
Yeah, to put a stop to that nation.
Yes, because he has made an enemy of the second in command of the king, Haman. And Haman, even though he had great power, he didn't like that Mordecai didn't bow to him. He didn't pay his proper dues. And so he's not just content to hurt Mordecai, he wants to hurt his family and the entire Jewish people. And so Esther, of course, sees, he's in this state. She asks what is happening, and he fills Esther in on the details. And he says, you must intervene. You're in this position of power. But Esther says, I haven't been summoned to the king for 30 days.
Because back then you had to be summoned, or you could be killed yourself.
And she said, if I go without being summoned, I will be put to death. And then I love this because he says, don't think your position is going to save you. If you close your eyes to this great injustice, you will be punished along with all of us. And deliverance will have to come from somewhere else.
Actually, what he was telling her is, you might die if you go for it, but your people's going to die if you don't.
Yes.
If you don't do it.
And so anyway, they come up with a plan. He said, who knows if you were born for such a time as this?
Yeah. Yes.
And so they come up with a plan, and they're going to institute the 3-day fast. And at the end of the 3 days, she just happens to be where the king can catch a glimpse of her. And he holds out his scepter, and she gained favor again with the king. And he says, you know, I'll give you up to half my kingdom. Well, tell me what you want. And she said, I want to have a banquet with you and Haman. And so, of course, the king is getting off kind of light. All he has to do is go to a banquet.
Yeah.
And so he grants this request, and Haman, they show up, and as the wine is flowing freely, he again asks, what is it that you require? I'll give you to half my kingdom. And she again says, just tomorrow, can we do this again? Let's have the same, let's do this all over again. So that night the king can't sleep. And he calls for his books to be opened, and he is informed that it was Mordecai who informed about the plot against the king. And so the next morning, Haman is coming in, and he, he's kind of in a good mood because he thinks he's going to hang Mordecai. But the king says, what should I do if I wish to honor a man? And of course, Haman in his arrogance can't possibly understand that anybody else would receive honor from the king. And so he says, well, he should be given the royal robe that you have worn, and he should ride on the horse that the king has rode on. And the king says, love it. Make sure you follow everything you've said for Mordecai. And so when you find favor with the king, even your enemies have to bless you.
I told y'all it's a good story. It is. It's the best story in the Bible.
Yes.
Really
and then, so now Haman is mad, and he goes home and he kind of tries to get some sympathy from his family, and his family, say, well, you're still going, to the banquet with the king. And about that time, here comes the servants to carry him off. And again, the king asks, what is it that you want? I'll give you up to half my kingdom. And this is when Esther makes her move. She presents her case. She said, King, my life is in danger. My family's life is in danger. My people, the nation is in trouble. And the king is obviously mad because who would dare touch his favorite queen? And then that's when she kind of has like a Perry Mason moment, where she exposes Haman for the cretin that he is. And the king's anger is mounted against Haman, and to make a long story short, Haman pays the price. His evil schemes are turned on his own head, and he and his family pay the price. But when you have the favor of the king, your enemies are destroyed.
Yes.
So that's what I learned from the book of Esther, that the king, that favor can bring, with your supervisors and your peers and the king, and that your enemies have to bless you.
Yes. And
that your enemies are destroyed.
That's right. Such a good story.
It is. I love that.
You know what? I was trying to think of a Bible story to share with y'all, and I found a fact about Esther and the king. I looked at Esther too. She was on my list. But I was studying Daniel.
Oh.
And some, King Darius was the king then. And some have said, and it's even been proven, that Darius's sons, who they were. So this fact really has been proven. But anyway, some say that Darius and this king, that king of Persia, that Esther was married to, same person. She was married to King Darius.
Really?
Yes, is that not
strange?
strange?
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's in Daniel. I don't think I even wrote the scripture down, but yeah. That, read the story of, how he was thrown into the lion's den. And the thing is, I got it. I got this commentary from Jimmy Swaggart.
Oh, okay.
So I trust it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, King Darius was not surprised that God would help Daniel. If in fact he was the same king, because he had seen God move before. He had seen God work before. And I was telling this to Eddie, and I said, I believe that King Darius trusted in Daniel's God. Or why would he even go and say, Daniel, did the lions eat you? And Daniel said, no, king, I'm here. You know, but I thought that was a good fact, and it just, that he was married to Queen Esther.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you got to study that one out. But I also found, why bad H? Yeah, but how can we have the favor of God? How can you have the favor of God? Well, number one, love God, of course. Like I said before we started, if you're a child of God, really striving to do the best that you can, I believe you're going to have the favor of God, and you're going to be kind. And number two, love people. And Ruth found favor with Boaz.
Yes.
You mentioned her too. Ruth found favor with Boaz because she was kind to her mother-in-law. Number three, hate what God hates. And that's found in Revelations 2. Revelations 2:6. And that's where that reference is. Hate what God hates. And that's what we should do anyway. Huh? Number four, give gifts and offerings. And that takes us to, remember Cain and Abel? Cain gave the good offering. Abel didn't. No, Abel gave the good offering. Cain didn't, because Cain killed Abel. Oh well. Cain's the one that didn't. He didn't find favor with God because he didn't obey. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. You know. So giving gifts and offerings, we can find the favor of God by doing that. Number five, be faithful. Just be faithful. That reference is Genesis 6:7 and 9 through 9. Noah was faithful, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I got something written down about Noah. Noah lived a blameless life. And that leads me to Mary too, but she is on the list, but on down. They found favor because they were blameless. They did what God wanted. Noah was a righteous man with a deep respect for God and a bold resistance to ignore the popular opinion. You know, don't go with the flow. You know, stand bold for what you believe in, and you're going to find the favor of God. Number 6, be righteous and blameless. That's what I just read. Number 7, be submissive. Esther was submissive. You know, she was submissive to the will of God, and I mean, like when she had to go through the process of becoming a beautiful lady. You know, they had to spend so many hours soaking in oil and
it was a 12-month process.
Yeah, but she was submissive to that, and she didn't ask for anything more. You know, some of them could have been snooty and say, I want my hair fixed like this. But she just went with the flow, and that's what we got to do if we want the favor of God. How about be humble or have humility? Mary was humble. She found the favor of God because she was humble. You know, and she, I wrote something down for her too. In fact, she, while she wasn't in a way the mother of all mothers, there's nowhere in the New Testament that says that she's to be worshipped.
Right.
You know, or given a title or anything. She was humble. She had humility. Mary was chosen because she found favor with God. She was humble, and her godly life pleased God so much to an extent that He chose her for this most important task. Mary's blessing not only brought joy, but it also brought her pain. And that's what it seems like a lot of times, you know, when we do the will of the Lord, it comes with confrontation sometimes. When God calls someone to a specific mission for Him, it will almost always involve blessing and suffering. joy and sadness, success and disappointment. And I thought about that, and yeah, I guess I have experienced that. Also, be honest, and that brings us to Joseph. Joseph found favor. He found favor with God. He found favor almost in everything that he did. In fact, one of the commentaries that I read said that we could compare his life to Jesus' life almost. You know, he was faithful to his daddy. When his brothers sold him, he was faithful to who he was sold to, and then he went into Potiphar's house. He was faithful to Potiphar. He was unfaithful to Potiphar's wife. This is a story that you should read too. It's one of those good ones. And she had him thrown in jail, and then he was faithful in jail. In fact, he did more for God when he was in jail than he did when he was in the palace. So, but if we're honest with people, we can show, have the favor of God. And number 10, get wisdom. And who do you think of about wisdom? Solomon. Go to Solomon. He wasn't always a good guy, but it seemed like he always found favor. You know, he strived for God's favor. Almost everywhere in Proverbs, get wisdom. To get wisdom, do this. You know, but anyway, I want the favor of God on my life, don't you? More than anything, we want the favor of God. I think that must be about all that I've got. That's about all I got for favor. But I want the favor of God on my life, and you need the favor of God on your life. Get in there and get on the right side. Get on God's right side, and you'll find favor with God. Be the best Christian you can be, and you'll get favor from God. Thanks for joining us tonight. We love you.